Okay. Good morning. I'm glad everyone could come on this beautiful sunny summer day. This is the last local summit meeting of this season. We will resume again in September on the third Tuesday of the month. I think it's the 16th, where we're going to talk about wage theft. So I urge you all to come then. Wow. This season we've had a wide range of issues that we've explored, and today we're going to look below at our infrastructure. But before we do that, we're going to have a short 2-minute tidbit from Jeff on our local history.
2 minutes. It's Arena over here. All right. First of all, a couple of things. We saw the cheap promo we had on Local Live. Were you all watching? Not many, obviously, but we're going to do it again. So Summit is getting some cheap promos on Local Live, and I urge you all to watch it. There's a couple of things that I wanted to do, sort of addendums. First of all, I neglected, Phil Reisman has come out with some articles, and the neat thing about him is that he comes from the town of Mamaroneck, where he was raised. So he has a lot of little local information, and he wrote a couple. I missed a park in Mamaroneck Village, and that was Kemper Park. And he wrote a very nice article about one of the folks that was killed in World War II. And he also wrote a recent article about Cargo Park, and nobody knows where that is. But come September, I'm doing a thing on the parks in the unincorporated section. And also he wrote an article June 8th about Gloria Posha-Pritz, who was having a dinner, her 90th birthday dinner at the club car at the end of this month, and I urge you all to attend. And he said, folks like Gloria, their quest is to provide a context as to who we are and how we came to be, and so they enrich our lives. And I think that really sort of puts it. And the next thing I'd like to do is to welcome Nancy White, who is a new board member. And the reason I'm especially welcoming her is that she's the head of the Historical Society in Larchmont, and she's good meat for tidbits. All right, Nancy, you're on.
All right, and I also we're having our house and garden tour.
Oh, it's another cheap promo, huh?
I've got brochures.
All right, if you're all listening to Local Live, this is the end of the semester, the end of the school year. So this is a pop quiz, so take out your blue books. Name the only parent-child mayor and supervisor. I was going to exclude you, Jane, but go ahead. Oh, now you're fudging. Anybody else?
Need the name.
Thank you, Liz Feld and Maury Neuer. And the town of Mamaroneck Police Department is located in the town center. Where was its prior location? Thank you. Our geographical area is bookended by 2 mill ponds. Name them. Premium is one. Van Amridge. Come on, folks. All right. There's an island in Van Amridge Mill Pond named Bayan. What does it stand for?
Believe it or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. How many CVS's do we have in our geographical area?
Oh, okay.
23. No, that's not right. 5. 5 is the answer.
Yeah.
How many Dunkin' Donuts? This is a trick question. No. 4. There's one in the Hess station.
I just want to say,
Pardon?
I listen when you speak.
Oh, thank you. Sabrina is a good board member. All right, here's my trick question. If you were watching Local Live, they had it wrong, and my trick question was Marisa told me on the witness stand, and my cousin Vinny, when she said, that's a trick question, there's no answer. Which of the 3 streets, Homer, Byron, and Dante, and they said the village, but it's really the unincorporated section, is not named after a writer?
It's not a what?
It's not named after a writer.
Dante.
Dante. And the reason?
He was a poet.
Somebody's name. It was the last big estate, the Mercadante estate on Weaver Street. Okay? Name 2 other names for the flats. Strawberry Patch and Washingtonville. Thank you. Official name of the park at the end of Oak and Willow Avenue in Larchmont Manor.
Woodbine.
Thank you. That comes from the mayor. She got it right. Where is Gillies Park and who was it named after? I mean, you know, Gillies, but who is she? Where is it? Come on, folks. I guess I had a different group when I did this Parks in the Village of Mamaroneck. It's the triangular park. If you go in Orienta Avenue and just
that
after you would turn to Rushmore, if you kept going straight, that big triangular piece of grass. And who was Gillies? It was Anita Gillies. And she was a very active local lady, but her claim to fame, she got married to Ed Dooley. And who the hell is Ed Dooley? Well, he was mayor of Mamaroneck for 6 years, and he's one of our own congressmen for 6 years.
Oh, that's right.
All right, so he was a big deal. And he was the New York State Athletic Commissioner who disbanded, who got rid of Cassius Clay because of his views on the draft. And I want to thank one of my best favorite local sources, and that's Joe Germano, who wrote and said not only was Anita Gillies married to Ed Dooley, but she was his English teacher in Mamaroneck High School. And Joe is 80. Only person to hold both offices of mayor and supervisor. All right, I have to give this to Jane.
Yes,
Leo Goldsmith, thank you. Who wrote The Year Without a Santa Claus, which was a book in 1956, a 1974 TV animation, and a 2006 movie?
Wasn't Clement Seymour, was it?
Thank you. Phyllis McKinley from Larchmont.
When in doubt, say Phyllis McGinnis.
All right. Who wrote in 7th grade, who wrote this poem? The snow falls and covers the land like God's protecting hand by pulling a snow white blanket over the land when winter comes. No. It is our Mamaroneck Village Poet Laureate, Mary Louise Cox. 7th grade. All right, mayors and supervisors. Which one became a state legislator? State legislator. Thank you. What mayor and supervisor became a county legislator?
Oppenheim. No. No, she didn't.
Paul Noto.
Paul Noto.
Paul Noto, yeah.
Which mayor or supervisor became Westchester District Attorney? Joe Gagliardi, thank you. Where was the Mamaroneck varsity football games originally played?
I'm not that old.
Where Mamaroneck...
Good answer.
But you did play football.
Oh, I deserve that. I deserve that one.
All right, so it was where
Wait,
Mamaroneck...
you have an answer.
There we go.
There'd be two places, one which would be athletic field, right next to the original high school, which they blocked off the houses from Rockland Avenue, and it was Manchester Field,
From Richbell Road.
Richbell Road.
Yeah, it was on Richbell Road, which didn't exist, and it was down the hill from the side of the high school that has the pillars. And you would say, well, why do they have such a little piece of land and big pillars? And it was because the football field was down low where Mamaroneck Gardens co-op apartments are. Okay, and here's the last question, and a trick question. How many harbors do we have? And name them. Horseshoe? Larchmont? This is the trick one. Mamaroneck, and what's the fourth?
Not Delancey Cove.
No. Actually, it's Mamaroneck Harbor, because Mamaroneck Harbor is really two harbors. One is Mamaroneck Harbor, and that's the West Basin, and the East Basin is officially Rhinebeck Harbor.
Really?
Thank you very much, and I turn it over to Janet to introduce our program.
It's a local.
He could have gone on for another 15 minutes about taking it away.
A little more interesting than this one.
You want to hear what lurks below? Yeah, that's it, the status of what lies below. Well, we're very, very happy to have these wonderful people here. We have Steve Altieri, who has been, they sent me their bios, which are extensive. Steve has been, what, right?
Remember, you asked for them.
I asked for them and they gave them to me, and I was delighted to get them, except Anne. Anne, I called 3 times, Anne, please send me something. Anne, send me, then she said I was a CCD for 10 years. Okay, well, Steve is a professional government manager and executive, and he has served for the town administrator. He's been since 1982. And, okay. Well, actually, I worked with him back in that time, during that time when we put the building together.
Oh, goodness, Janice, let's not go back.
In addition to his duties as town administrator, he's the superintendent of the Larchmont-Mamaroneck Joint Garbage Disposal Commission. And prior to his tenure as working for us, he worked for the village of Scarsdale and in Hartford, Connecticut. He has served as the president of the New York Metropolitan Area Municipal Administrative Association and president and member of the executive board of the New York State City County Management Association, and on and on and on. He's been president of the Larchmont Lions Club, and he went to Hartford, and that's where he got his degree.
Correct.
So, and after that, we have Richard Slingerland. Now, Richard has been manager for about, I have to talk into this.
Right.
All right, he has worked for 27 years in local government, and 5 years has been the manager of the village of Mamaroneck. 7 years as village administrator of Pelham. He's worked in Tarrytown, Rye Brook, Yonkers, and actually he worked for the county. So we're bringing a lot of information to us, and you work on a $33 million budget, and he is the chairperson of the Westchester County Long-Term Recovery Coalition. And he's been a 10-year member of the Rotary Club. Now, after that, we have Anne McAndrews, who sent me nothing. But she did say she was a former lawyer, went to Georgetown and went to Boston U. Right, so, but she's no longer practicing law. But we know that she has been mayor now since 2012. You served on the town zoning board, the planning board, 10 years as a village trustee. Before that, she was president of the League of Women Voters. I got her into that when she moved on to my street, and she said, I want to do something. I have 5 kids. Well, that time she only had 1.
I had
I've got to do
0.
something. And I said, come on in, we'll get you into the League of Women Voters. And she started there and was president there and has been serving this community for a very long time. She brought with her, though,
My wingman.
the wingman, and he is the foreman of the village of Larchmont, the DPW. Now, what she said, you're also going now to school, and you're becoming you're going for your engineering degree. She mentioned.
trying, yeah.
Well, that's congratulations, and she's working here for the village for 20 years, and he has been foreman for 6.5 years, and he's also worked prior to that in the construction business. So I think they can answer all of our questions, but we have a little change in venue. We're going to have Nancy Seligson, would you like to come up? She told us that she has been passionate about what's happening in this community and in the underground. And so she would like to actually give you a little bit of history on this and and help them with questions. So please, Nancy, say a little bit.
Good morning, everyone. I called Elaine and asked if I could give a little introduction to what's going on underground and what's lurking there, because it is so connected to what's going on above ground. And I've worked for the Long Island Sound Study for 23 years and have been in water quality advocacy for Long Island Sound for that amount of time. I ran an organization called Save the Sound, and I currently chair the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Long Island Sound Study. So I've been working with the local level, state level, county level, and federal level on these issues, because the pipes that these guys are going to talk about affect our lives in every way possible. It is very fortunate for us in our society that we can be very mindless about what happens to water when you flush that toilet or turn on your sink or turn on your sprinkler or when it pours rain in our community. But guess what? It all goes into pipes. And we have 2 separate systems for stormwater and for sanitary sewer water. And of course, we have a water system, pipe system for potable water as well. But everything we do affects the water system. Everything we do on the ground affects it. The amount of water we use affects the treatment of the water, because what you take in has to go out. What goes out is affected by the weather, because if it rains, there's lots of water rushing off of all our paved surfaces that's going into the storm drain system. But somehow, because our systems are so old, they're interrelated, and a lot of water from the storm water system gets into the sanitary sewer system or gets into the sewage treatment plants. And all of it ends up in Long Island Sound, because we have a system of pipes that fortunately carries everything that we use underground, but it eventually ends up in Long Island Sound at different levels of treatment. So I wanted to just make everyone realize that as interesting, I think, as the underground pipe system is, and how intricate it is, and how important it is to our lives in making our homes livable, safe, healthy, it all connects to our environment as well, and it all connects to Long Island Sound. So Long Island Sound is affected by everything we do in terms of water, and everything we put on our roads, roofs, grass, lawns, driveways. It all gets washed into Long Island Sound. I just wanted to tee that up because we're going to hear about how these systems work and think about how you actually affect that flow of water and where it's going and how it gets there. Thanks. Okay, who's going first?
Good morning. Okay. You know, you've had sessions here where you've packed the house, overflowing. So we talk about sewers and we talk about water lines, and guess what? Not so full here today. But the loyal fans are here, and we all appreciate that. But you have to understand the apathy that goes on when it comes to the discussion of infrastructure. I think if anybody asked any of us what we think the most critical issue is for local government right now, it's our infrastructure. You see the bridges that collapse, you see these things that are very obvious, and they're very sensational. What's far less sensational is when you flush the toilet and it just goes away. And you say, well, it went somewhere. I used to do a program for the high school when they had a local government program. And when I would start the program, I would put 2 toilet bowls up on the screen. So, you know, generally, what do we do before we go to bed? And generally, what do we do when we get up in the morning? And that was just to try and emphasize the fact that we are not just about the police cars and the fire trucks and the snow plows and the garbage trucks. There is this whole network that Nancy referred to, this whole network of underground pipes that are, and you will hear from all of us, in some cases probably 100 years old. And they all need replacement. So the question is, how do we replace it? How do we finance it? And what is the future of our infrastructure? So Rich and I had a chance to talk a little bit, and I think Ann and Rich are probably going to focus more on sanitary sewers. To say the least, it is not any less critical in the town than it is in the 2 villages, but I'm going to focus my comments on the water system. Again, as Nancy said, you turn on the water comes out, you fill up your glass, and all goes well. But did anybody think about where the water came from? How did it get into your home? And that is now what's facing all of us, is a collapsing water structure. We can follow really 2 philosophies. We can wait for the pipe to break and then fix it, but in the meantime, someone is without water, some neighborhood is without water. Or we can begin an active program of replacing the pipes on some regular schedule, just like we resurface roads, just like we replace police cars. But then comes the issue of how do you finance all of this? There was a time when the federal and state governments were funding anywhere from 55 to 85% of the cost of the replacement of infrastructure. We saw it in the very first inflow and infiltration programs that happened in the town and the 2 villages back in the late 80s. Now we face 0 in the way of financing. And we face a tax cap. So we have the Department of Environmental Conservation and the EPA telling us replace this, replace that, build a new pump station, but there's no money. And so that is but yet another crisis for us. So let me talk about what is probably the biggest water project that is on our schedule coming up, and that is the question of getting UV treated water, ultraviolet treated water, which is now a mandate of the EPA. Up until now, most of the water from the Westchester Joint Waterworks system, which actually serves all 3 communities except that the village is merely a purchaser of water, but the town of Mamaroneck, village of Mamaroneck, and town of Harrison are all members of the Westchester Joint Waterworks. The UV requirement is that we must now have this ultraviolet treated water throughout the system. It actually should have happened about 3 or 4 years ago, but we keep delaying the process, trying to find the best way to do it. So right now, Tony Canetta, who's the general manager of the Joint Waterworks, is working on a program to try and draw that water from existing New York City water shafts so that we don't have to build our own filtration plant, which I think the cost now is upwards of $25 or $30 million. So now just imagine that cost being levied against the 3 municipalities. Just imagine what happens to your water rates and or your property taxes. But the water system is one that requires just as much care as the sewer and the storm drain system because it is supplying your water. And the piping system that we use is old, and we have generally been following a practice of let's wait till it breaks and then we'll fix it. It's not necessarily the right way to do it. But see, it's just not an interesting subject, and I don't know how we make this more interesting because it is so critical to what we do each and every day. And we now face, we were just talking about it before we began here, that the City of New York is going to impose in 2017 a requirement for us to cut back our water usage by close to 50% so that they can rework some of their water tunnels and pump stations up in the Chelsea area. Just imagine you cutting your water by 50%. Just think about it for a moment. What would you do to cut your water use back by 50%? It's hard to believe. What is this restaurant going to do to cut its water use back by 50%? So what is it we should do when it comes to the water system? We need to talk to our state legislators. We need to talk to our federal representatives. Local governments are not going to be able to carry this all by themselves. What we are going to need is assistance, just as we received that assistance back in the late 80s. The water system is very delicate, it's very old, and what we need is help to finance it so that we can replace water mains on a regular schedule as opposed to the sort of catch as catch can, wait till it breaks and then we'll fix it. Because at some point it will have a major impact on the quality of our life. Thank you. Questions about the water system? You want to do questions before? Wait, you want to wait?
Okay. Thanks, Steve. So I get the interesting part about the history of our system. Sorry. Everybody may not know that the Mamaroneck Joint Sewage Treatment Plant was built back in 1929. But if you look at all the other questions that were given to me and say, you know, how do you deal with these things? You never know what you're going to find until you put a shovel in the ground. And that's the honest truth, because there's things that are forgotten. We did a storm drain and water quality improvement project up and down Boston Post Road to replace our collapsing catch basins, install some new lines to get the storm water out to the harbor. And as we were going across Boston Post Road, there were 2 major, probably 15 to 18 inch Con Edison gas mains underneath Boston Post Road. And they originally thought that the lines were inactive. They said, wait a minute, maybe we should check. So check they did, and they found they were not inactive, they were active, so thank goodness. You know, whenever you're doing something like that, you always have to be cautious and careful. So when you talk about the present condition of our underground infrastructure, water lines, gas lines, sewers and storm drains, The village was settled in incorporated in 1895. The town was settled in 1661. So you're talking about municipalities that used to use bedpans and chamber pots as our source of sewage management. So we've come a long way in the past 400 years. But we still have what's that?
350.
350. Who's counting? So, what's the present condition of our underground infrastructure? I think generally the water system is probably in good shape, but it does have to be maintained. On occasion, after years of use, those water mains will get tuberculation. So you'll have rust or other buildup, silt, sediment, minerals that will collect inside the pipe, and you'll go from a big 8-inch or 10-inch or 12-inch pipe to something that's only 3 or 4 inches clear. And we could do the same thing to a water main that we could do to a sewer main that's grinded out, run a new line through it, what's called a cured-in-place pipelining or in situ form or something of that nature, and then we could run the water through it again. What's the condition of our gas lines? Well, that's something that's really in the hands of Con Edison. But I think anything underground, especially in a high water table area like ours on a waterfront, on the Sound, and also a coastal area like Long Island Sound, we get the impacts of salt water. So a lot of people in those coastal areas with the high water, the salt is gradually eating away at all the pipes underground. Who's responsible for these things? We are. But the entities that manage it for us, Westchester Joint Waterworks. For the plants, it's County Department of Environmental Facilities. For our gas mains, it's Con Edison. For the water, did I say water already? It's the Joint Waterworks. Yeah. For the sewers, it's both the village of Mamaroneck, the town of Mamaroneck, the village of Larchmont, and then once you go to the mains or the arterial sewers or storm drains, those are the county. But when you say who's responsible, we are, because we pay for it. Whether it's through user fees, through the water usage, whether it's through user fees through Con Edison, whether it's through taxes and other surcharges or charges through our water bill or through our property taxes. We're responsible for all of that. And I printed out a few things, if I could even pass these around. This is to show what some of our sewer mains will look like after 50 to 80 years of use. They're intended to be designed for 50 to 80 years of use, but even a well-maintained pipe can build up that sediment and fill. Another example is a pipe that's had certainly its share of use, and these are the kind of things you'll find almost in any municipality, whether it's in your front lawn, whether it's in our street, whether it's in a park or down by a river. Believe it or not, there's miles of sanitary sewers that go under all our rivers and streams all around Westchester, and that includes Mamaroneck. As we found the hard way going to repair the Jefferson Avenue Bridge. Unfortunate. There's people who said that the sewer main was shown on the plans. What we show is the manholes, but it doesn't show the depth or the location of the sewer. So when they went to drive the sheet piling, they did not have it properly marked out, and they went right through the 15-inch sanitary sewer main, or 20-inch sanitary sewer main. And because it goes under a river and it's additionally difficult going under a river, we had camera work by a company coming in to tell us, to plan out the repair. And they were commenting on the video, this pipe, this reinforced concrete pipe was not designed to be waterproof. And that's probably an 80-year-old sewer pipe that they put under the ground, they put under the river, and it was not designed to be waterproof. They just joined these two pieces of concrete together. They didn't put any kind of grout or anything between them or seal it up. And, there might have been gradual leaks at every single joint of that sewer line. So when we put in a new sewer line, we put in a ductile iron pipe. It's a very high strength, high capacity line, and it's properly sealed. And that's the one section of the line that is, but this is the kind of replacement or repair that we're doing in a lot of different places in the village, and I expect Steve and Ann probably are too. This is the cured-in-place pipelining. Since the 1990s, the village has done about $3 million worth of repairs, secured in place pipelining. That amounts to, just going back to the 2002, it's about 1.8 million. So 3 million over that 20-year time span. And we've got another 350,000 scheduled for the next 5 years, for each of the 5 years. So 1.75 million. So we're planning additional repair, but even just thinking about that $3 million, that's only about 15% of our sewer system. So 85% still has to be repaired. We had a big report that the county worked with us on back in, I think it was 2004 or 5, by a company called Savin, and they did an evaluation of our system, and they found all kinds of great areas where we have what's called inflow and infiltration through cracks and leaks and things like that in the sewers. And that report alone just cost about $500,000 or $600,000. So we've done the required work that the county said we had to do since that report was done back in 2004-5. But again, you know, we still have 85% of our system to go through in line. Just with some of the big storms we had a major 4.1 inch rainfall on April 30th, May 1st. That caused 8 to 10 different sanitary sewer overflows around the village of Mamaroneck alone, including county sewer mains. There was just so much water getting into the system through those cracks, through those leaks, unfortunately also through storm drains, through people's patios, through basement sump pumps and things like that. All that water gets into the system, and then you have the magic manholes. You have so much water coming out of those manholes for the sewer system that the manhole covers will actually hover for a day until the sewage stops. It's amazing. So, is there a present crisis we may have to face? We've got an 80 to 100-year-old infrastructure. You know, is that a crisis? It's certainly not good. You know, I think where the Village of Mamaroneck is doing research and investigation through what's called an IDDE program. It's finding those illegal discharge detection and then finding places that we can eliminate it. The village has been working with the EPA and the DEC over the past few years to find some of those discharges. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last summit, but we actually found a house that did not have a sewer line. We had a house discharging sewage that did not have a sewer line. So we were trying to do investigations and find out where some major, we had a 31 million count of bacteria going into the Mamaroneck River, and we couldn't figure out where it's coming from. So we were doing dye tests, camera work, all kinds of other investigation. Finally, we had one house we couldn't get into, and we did a dye test, and we couldn't find anything. Did a dye test, couldn't find the dye going into the sewers. Did a dye test, couldn't find it in the manholes. Next thing you know, about 2 hours later, we had a nice big bloom of green dye going into the Mamaroneck River. It's like, how the heck did that get there? They did a camera test and found that there was no connection of their house discharge into the sanitary sewer. It would just go into the ground, gradually make its way into the river, and we ended up with, we forced the homeowner to fix that, and that cost them about $15,000. But these are the kind of things, you never know. You might have a collapsed pipe. You might have something that's...
And Rich, you might just mention that affects beach closings.
Exactly right.
Mamaroneck Harbor.
Exactly right. That affects beach closings at the clubs, at the Mamaroneck Harbor, all up and down Westchester and into Connecticut. So the sewer discharges are not just here in Mamaroneck. The sewer discharges are not just here in Larchmont. They're up into Connecticut. They're on any place, probably any place in the United States that has sewers, because our sewers are 80 to 100 years old. You know, thinking that back to the 17th and 18th century, when people didn't even have a real sewer system, they would throw the stuff out the window. And, you know, so we're at a much healthier state of our society. We're at a much stronger system of infrastructure, but relying on that big infrastructure means that we have to have big investments to maintain the big infrastructure. And that's something we're gonna have to continue, all of us are gonna have to do over the next, you know, 20 to 30 years. Let's see if there's any other final questions. I think that pretty much covers it for me, so.
I'll go over there.
Okay.
Get my cheat sheet here.
You found it?
Can you see a score? There you go. All right, look at that. We're down here. I know. Good morning, all. You may figure out by now that this is a topic that we talk about with each other all the time. So if there's any question about sharing of services, consolidation of services, everything that you hear about in the paper, believe me, we are all shoulder to shoulder in this because we are all involved in integrated services. This past weekend, I took a quick trip down to DC and back, and we went down the New Jersey Turnpike, which, as you know, has been doubling its size and capacity from, they say, from exit 6 to 8, but we know that's a long stretch. And we were actually driving on the new stretch. And they said this $2.4 billion project, which is a highway, is going to be completed by Thanksgiving. Well, as I'm driving along, seeing all this neat construction that millions of people see every day, I say, yeah, guys, but what about helping us out on the stuff underneath the ground, as you would say? I've described the village of Larchmont as a lovely house on the Sound, a lovely old house that needs constant maintenance and every so often a massive infusion of capital. And we all have houses and we know what I'm talking about. We've discussed the present and some of the future. I'd just like to add a little of the past. Because the history of Larchmont is all about water. It's about the settlement of the area down in Larchmont Manor in the town of Mamaroneck, and the quest for better water supplies, because each of these houses was on a well, and the quest for fire protection. And what this meant was that a private company was established called the Larchmont Water Company that dammed the Sheldrake River. And what we have now is the conservation area off of Weaver Street, which the village of Larchmont still owns. We don't get our water from there, but the Westchester Joint Waterworks has a pump station there. Why? Because the water system was already there, and Larchmont got its water supply from that reservoir well into the 1960s, which is kind of stupendous. Let's go down to Flint Park and go to the back of Flint Park. Lovely, beautiful area. Well, for many, many years, it was an incinerator. It was also a sewage treatment plant. So what happened over the years is that all these little systems were joined together by the county. The sewage system I'm talking about now, we slip between water and sewage because everything is water. What happened was that the Westchester County district system took over many of these smaller systems, but it didn't take over the entire system. Little Larchmont, 1.1 square miles, has 26 miles of sewage lines. We've got over 400 manhole covers. May I introduce Rick Bettery, my wingman here, our wonderful head of the DPW, who deals with this every day. So we have this incredibly large and complex system that is operated in conjunction with the county at many levels. Let's talk about water for a second. Larchmont maintains its own water department. We are a customer of the Westchester Joint Waterworks. With that comes enormous responsibilities of maintaining a system that's more than 100 years old. As I said, it started in the 1880s. In the 1920s, the village of Larchmont decided to buy the system. So it bought the system from a company called the Larchmont Water Company. The major shareholder was Cornelius Vanderbilt. So when I see Anderson Cooper on CNN, I say, yeah, $325,000 in 1922 at 4-point-something% over 30 years. Ain't bad. But we now own the water system. With that comes, as I said, tremendous responsibilities. And because of its age, we have needed to make some significant capital improvements, which you will soon see. We have a pump station because the system came down from what is largely New Rochelle. We have a pump station in the town of Mamaroneck on Byram Place. We have a couple of little green tanks, which you can now see because of the Cambion being built, those apartment buildings. And you look up a little hill and you'll see 2 water tanks. We are replacing the pumps in the pump station, computerizing them, improving them significantly. We'll be doing that this summer and fall. And after we finish that, we will be replacing the tanks. You'll see one single white one, slightly larger than the large one that's there. That takes millions and millions of dollars and is helped not by any wonderful state system of helping municipalities keep their systems up to date, but rather on the backs of the ratepayers. I investigated getting a low-interest loan from the state, and it was a series of points that we had to gather. The number one point was the census tract. Well, we're not in a good census tract when it comes to help on state loans. The answer is, you betcha. Okay, went down the list, and I said, well, what do I need? She said, do you have any E. coli? I said, that was good for a lot of points. I said, well, how much do you need? We could supply some. But so we are at the level of having to go out and borrow over the long term for significant improvements to our water system. That's the water system. That's the pipes that bring the water in. We've also been doing very serious investigation for our water leaks. And we have found that sometimes we can't find them in time. They're late. So we are going to be introducing brand new water meters into our residents. About 1,800 water meters. And it's very interesting the way that the information is going to be transmitted. Rather than having an employee go door to door as he does and check something that I used to think was high tech, but it's not like a crank up phone on the side of each house. They put in a little something and they write something down and off to the next one. It takes a tremendous amount of time. The data will actually be transmitted, much like our Con Ed meters are. You don't see any Con Ed meter readers anymore. So all this information will be transmitted in real time. And by the way, yes, there are those privacy advocates who think that this is something absolutely terrible. You know, the man is monitoring every time you use water in your house. The transmission is interesting. We are investigating now whether we have to set up antennas or whether it will be transmitted right to the cell tower, or whether we bring a truck just up and down the streets. Though that's being investigated right now as to the most efficient way to handle this. But isn't it intriguing how we can do that? And what this means is that we can monitor leaks. You know, all of a sudden, something will beep. We'll be able to really zero in on something, and you won't be receiving water bills like the letter I got from someone who was very, very concerned about how I increased their water bills almost 100% by increasing the water rates. And we looked into it, and I called her and said, your consumption went up 80%. This is something 6 months ago we should have been able to detect beforehand, but who knew? And I said, do you have a sprinkler system? Yes. Hasn't been checked lately. Silence. I said, well, I think you have a leak. And she said, well, I don't know. I go away all summer. And her bill went up 80%. That's the kind of thing that we should be able to detect. given the new water meters, the new reading system, and all of this costs money. And where is it going to come from? It's going to come from your water bill. Let me slip into sewers for a moment. We discussed water in, now we're talking about water out. And it also has to do with water coming down. That's rain. I went back to the car because we have a flow monitoring report that we all are involved with. And I had been mentioned before, inflow and infiltration. When I was first a trustee back in 2000, we were just finishing up a large county effort to line the sewer lines. Remember how I said that the county didn't take over the whole system? Well, that's right, they didn't. And we'd love them to, frankly, and that may be something that we talk about in the future. But in the meantime, we have got, as I said, 26 miles of our own lines. Flow monitoring report. What does this mean? This means that over a long period of time, there are monitors on at different points of all our jurisdictions. And you can monitor the flow of water through the sewer lines. That's the part that goes out of the house. Time of day, 7 o'clock goes up, you know, and 10 o'clock at night. Pretty well set over a period of time. Also, rain. When it rained, the amount of water going through the sewer lines, that's not the storm drains. We're talking about how Nancy said about two different systems. Storm drains, rain goes down the street, goes down the storm drain, goes out to the sound. Boom, boom, boom. How come all that rain is also going into the other system? That's our sanitary system. And it was monitored. Rain, water goes up. That means many things are happening. That means people have their sump pumps connected. We call them illegal connections. The sump pumps are taking the rain and putting it right into the sanitary system. Well, we can find out about those, and we do. Disconnect them. But also about how old all those pipes are. I used to think that when a pipe was broken, stuff came out of the pipe into the ground around, and you had a problem. That's not necessarily what happens with the sanitation system. These systems are pumped. They create a vacuum. They can suck water out of the ground into the pipes, thereby significantly increasing the volume of water that is taken into the sanitary system during a rain event. Well, what does that mean? That means that our sanitary facilities are overloaded. And we share the village of Larchmont, and part of the town goes to the New Rochelle plant. And we share some retention, and we also share something we call an SSO, which is in the back of Flint Park, which is a colossal, huge, 300, how many gallons in that?
It's a couple hundred million.
A couple of 100 million gallons in the back of, in that great big plant in the back of Flint Park. What happens when that overflows? And that's just a huge retention. It kind of holds it and lets the plant catch its breath. If that goes, the safety valve, rather than having backflows into each of our homes, the safety valve goes out at the back of Willow, out into the Sound. Every system has to have, you know, a safety valve. And so ours is called an SSO, and what is happening is the county is saying you have to close them. So we, in cooperation with the city of New Rochelle and Pelham or Pelham Manor? Both, okay. Share this system of allowing us to retain some water during a rain event, yet having the ability for when it's over capacity to shoot some of this, we call it effluent, highly diluted, because it's mostly rainwater, out into the sound. We are under several mandates from the federal government and from the state government to do something about all of this, and we are working on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis to do something about this system as to not to make it worse. Meanwhile, all those pipes are going to have to be lined like you saw Rich's example, and that is going to cost a heap of money. And the heap of money may be paid by us individually on a separate utility tax attached to our water bill. Because we cannot, how do we pay for $1 million zillion worth of work that has to be done to control our day-to-day lives when we have a tax cap and also in the future being faced a mandate from the public saying we want a rebate check, so you have to cut your budget up to 3% in the next 3 years. So more to come, and maybe we should just have a huge environmental bond like we had several years ago on a state level, raise a heap of money and give us the ability to do the work and pay for the work over a long period of time. Otherwise, we will just sit back and do what we have always been doing for the last 100 years, and that's patch. My grandmother used to say, a patch upon a patch is better than a hole, but everything is fraying. So on that note, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rich. You all did a great job of explaining what's going on in these systems. For 23 years, I've been going down to Washington with colleagues in the Long Island Sound Study and people who are interested in creating jobs, laborers and labor union folks, to say, let's work together as a partnership, federal, state, and local partnership to work on these systems. We know they have to be improved, we know they have to be repaired, maintained, and they're not right now. And just slapping a consent order on the municipalities to fix them means that, and this is terrifying as the supervisor of the town, it means looking at huge borrowings to try and fix these systems, all on our own. But this is part of the fabric of our community. It's basic infrastructure, just like the bridges, just like the New Jersey Turnpike, just like all the highways and roads. We need a partnership among the federal, state, and local governments to do this together. We can't do it on our own. The federal government helped build these systems with us, they helped maintain them with us, and in 1980 they changed their mind and said we're going out of that business. But that left us holding the ugly bag. And we really need to fight for that kind of assistance in going forward, or we're going to be looking at very large borrowings to fix these systems. And they're all connected. The drinking water, the sanitary sewers, and the storm sewer. It's all different components of the whole hydrologic system that we have here. And we're lucky. We're lucky that we have streams and rivers in Long Island Sound into which we actually dispose of this stuff once it's treated in whatever phase it's treated. We're lucky that we have such sophisticated sewage treatment plants. The Mamaroneck plant has just been upgraded. The New Rochelle sewage treatment plant has just been upgraded. And that's why a lot of you saw your sewer tax bills go up very high, much higher this past year, and that's from the county. So it's a complicated system, but we're all responsible for it. We all affect it. If you think about it, if you can reduce your water use, that would be helpful to the system at any time. Don't run your sprinklers when it's raining or right after it's rained. That extra water is not doing anyone any good. And think about how your consumption affects it. Also, putting fertilizers and pesticides on your lawns affects Long Island Sound, because that runs right off into the storm drains and goes in there and grows plants, which we don't want to do in Long Island Sound. So I'm hoping that we will be able to convince the federal, state, and county governments to work with us, because doing this on a regional basis is so much smarter and will be so much more efficient than doing it on our own. And I'm glad that this many people came to hear about what's lurking under the ground.
In the 80s, remember Fraggle Rock? Yes. Everything was underground. And what drives me to this is that the storm drains are my particular thing. How many people have you seen rake leaves into the storm drains? And just the other day I saw a gardener with one of the blow things, blowing everything down. Painters putting paint water down the storm drains. This stuff goes directly into the harbors, let alone our silting problem of all of those leaves and so on, and the harbors filling up. So it drives me crazy. So I want to thank every one of you, because this is one of the most important problems that we have in our 3 local communities. 4, don't forget Rye Neck. Thanks very much, guys.
Sure.
Are there any questions? Any questions?
Yes. Well, I don't really participate since I'm on a septic system. However, I do pay a sewer tax for some reason, so I think I can.
Thank you very much.
And I pay to maintain my septic system.
Great, that's the best.
But I'm in the town of Mamaroneck. What other communities go, water flows down, goes down into the body of water. What other communities have their stormwater and waste flow into our systems?
Here's the list.
Well, nothing, the question was how many other communities have their sanitary sewage or their stormwater flow into the systems in the town and the 2 villages. The answer on sanitary sewage is really none of it. The local sanitary sewer systems contribute into a county interceptor line. In terms of stormwater, there's no question the 3 communities are at the bottom of at least 2 major watersheds. So we are taking water from as far up as North Castle and White Plains, New Rochelle, Scarsdale, Eastchester, not too much.
Rye City, White Plains, towns of Harrison, North Castle, sorry. These are the communities served by the Mamaroneck Joint Sewage Treatment Plant. New Rochelle, Rye City, White Plains City, towns of Harrison, Mamaroneck, North Castle, Rye, and Scarsdale, and the villages of Larchmont-Mamaroneck.
That's sanitary sewage, though.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
Do they
storm.
participate in any way to help us, financially cope with?
They all pay the same sewer tax that you pay.
Yeah,
The
but
county sewer
on,
tax.
it's a countywide sewer tax.
on storm drains, though, well, don't want to kill the ketchup.
kill the
There we go,
ketchup.
okay. On storm drains, that means the water coming down. We don't really have a great deal of cooperation. We tried a few years ago through an organization called LISWIC, Long Island Sound Watershed Intermunicipal Council, to set up a system whereby the communities would participate, and the participants of the the individual homeowners would be taxed according to a formula about the size of their lot, and that would be some way to figure out how much stormwater they're introducing into the stormwater system. We did a huge amount of study on this system, but it really kind of got caught up, I think, in the late 2000s and the economy and what have you. But we'll gladly dust it off to have a more equitable system of the maintenance of stormwater systems. It ain't easy. figuring that out?
Some of us here are not only summiteers, but we're also involved with the food pantry that we run in Mamaroneck. And Richard mentioned the heavy rain that we had gotten at the end of April, beginning of May. Well, the next morning, I was wading through about 6 inches of water at the CAP Center, which is essentially ground zero for the floodplain in Mamaroneck. And I was wondering, and I know this has been historically a big problem, I was wondering whether there's any progress in trying to relieve some of that flooding that happens when we have severe weather.
Sure. The village has been working with the Army Corps of Engineers for the past 5 years. We had a fully funded federal study of the Mamaroneck and the Mamaroneck River and Sheldrake River drainage problem that comes into the village of Mamaroneck. Now, keeping in mind exactly what Steve said and Ann mentioned about the systems, our stormwater system reaches all the way up to the county airport. So that's 30 square miles of rainwater that comes into the rivers, that comes across 287, that comes down through the golf courses, and all ends up going through the Mamaroneck River and the Sheldrake River into the harbor in Long Island Sound. We are working with them to, we've suggested or asked them to prioritize a $60 million project that's going to involve channelizing the Mamaroneck and Sheldrake rivers in key locations. The federal government would have to put up about $29 to $30 million. The state about 12 to 13, and the village of Mamaroneck and Westchester County each between $8 and $9 million. So we're looking at roughly a $60 million project. I mean, but that's the kind of thing that would be appropriate on a regional level, because all that water comes down to us, but we're facing the brunt and the worst of the flooding on it. So we'll see where that goes. We've been told there's a what's called a WRDA bill. It's a Water Resource Development Bill that's being proposed at the end of 2014, early 2015, and that may both help the Mamaroneck River remediation problem, as well as what Nancy mentioned about the sewers and the things around the United States completely, trying to address some of the problems with our regional, local and regional sewer systems.
Could I ask what you explain, you said channelize the water? You said that this project would channelize the river?
Channelize.
What does that mean?
That means you take a box that's that big, figuring out the width of the river, and you're going to widen it.
Eminent domain.
You're going to widen and deepen it.
Eminent domain.
Keith, actually, it's not eminent domain. What it is, it would be an easement where the village would become responsible for maintaining all the rivers behind people's homes, where the river actually, the property line goes across the river. We have property owners who completely own that river, and they have collapsing walls going into the river, and they're responsible for it now. So if we get this federal project, the village will become responsible for all that, as well as deepening and widening.
Yeah, but I would beg to differ, Rich, and I know that you caught between a rock and a hard place because you inherited a lot of this coming in. But in essence, it is. And with the Army Corps of Engineering, all they're doing is studying the study that was studied. Okay? And as a result of that, but what I'd like to know is when they start talking about channelizing, because obviously that's going to adversely affect my neighbors, my neighborhood. And but what happens when the Sheldrake and Mamaroneck come together and egresses out? They never really talked about the widening of the, what they call the narrowing underneath Metro North.
Correct.
What is county, what is state, what is town? And that was the biggest argument in terms of the egress of water that would then not create the buildup. I live in an area where people cannot believe that a river that flows southwards, when it floods, it all of a sudden reverses.
Keith, I was actually here at 1:30 in the morning driving around to check on the flooding
Yes.
problem, April 30th, May 1st.
That's why I say, and I'll
So,
give you that,
no.
that much.
So I thank you.
What a guy.
So I was checking on things, and driving around the river, just seeing the improvement we did to the Jefferson Avenue Bridge by widening it and taking out the center pier. That Mamaroneck River was anywhere from a foot to 2 feet below the top of the riverbank. But you're exactly right. The problem started at Columbus Park because there's so much water coming into what we call the confluence, what the Army Corps calls the confluence. It turns into a completely messed up flow. Instead of you have a T where the Sheldrake hits the Mamaroneck, and then you have two 90-degree turns where it goes under the railroad.
Yes.
It's like it's hitting a brick wall and it stops, and then it goes and hits another brick wall and it stops. So they're saying that just by correcting that confluence, that joint point where you have the T and then the two 90-degree turns, would help reduce the water in the entire area by 2 to 2.5 feet.
Yes.
Is
So
that the railroad's responsibility?
No, it is a big difference because on last rainfall, the river crested.
Yeah.
And right there, Howard Avenue, from starting up from Harbor Heights, River Street, Howard Avenue, coming all the way through, back to Plaza. It crested, but it never went over.
Yeah.
And as a result, it had a lot to do with that project. So, all well and good. Our sewers were bubbling, but they didn't back up.
Yeah.
So, we're happy about that. But when it comes to what you're talking about channelizing, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to the guys, and they're like talking about, well, there's channels and different places. The river was reconfigured in '36 through WPA, and when the water always tries to find its original route, and it just straightens out in our neighborhood. Anytime you see on Howard Avenue, River Street, First Street, and all the rest of the places where the current, and we were actually watching the houses float away, the current of the river was less than the current that was on the main street. It was that much more powerful.
Yeah.
So I can understand the Army Corps of Engineering, but I just think that they're studying the study.
Keith, you're right to some extent, but you know what else? As part of the study, looking at all the alternatives that were back on the table back in the 1980s, which was the last time they had this plan, they had come up with a plan to have a 10-foot tunnel
Yeah.
go under Fenimore Road out to the West Basin. Now, just as part of the environmental review, they decided and discussed that project and financial review, figured out that old plan, which cost $60 million back in the 80s, would cost $150 to $160 million now. So the present day cost of the project we're proposing with the channelizing the rivers is about 30 to 40% of what it would have been back in the 80s, and they wouldn't even let that project of the tunnel happen now because it's not financially appropriate, it doesn't meet the cost-benefit analysis, and the environmental concerns would put too much fresh water in the West Basin. So it's a...
And in fairness, I don't mean to capitalize on it, but in fairness to it, there have been other things that have been put in place. And I had one other question that Jeff had mentioned in terms of people raking and different things. Who's responsible? Either Steve or you can answer this. Who's responsible? Is the contractors or is it the homeowners? Because everybody, when it comes to getting rid of debris, when it comes to doing some of the illegalities that are going on, who's responsible? Who can be fined?
Both.
Both.
Okay.
So you're hiring a contractor who's doing work for you, and your contractor is not following the proper rules. They could be fined, and potentially you could be fined.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, Nancy. Apropos of what you were saying, you were basically encouraging homeowners to, monitor.
And here, down here.
Sorry, you were standing up.
She'll repeat the question.
Sure.
I got it. You were encouraging homeowners, for instance, to self-monitor, for instance, not, you have a sprinkler that's on a timer, shouldn't be on a timer if it's raining, and assorted other things like that. My question is, rather than requesting cooperation or self-monitoring, has the board got any proposed legislation that might restrict it?
Yes.
You
In
want
fact,
this? Repeat the question. Yeah.
The wired one's a little bit better.
Oh, okay.
Nina asked whether there.
It's not helping in the room. That's LMC-TV. That'll help in the room.
I can scream though. Nina asked whether we had any proposed legislation or considered legislation in regard to regulating how people use their irrigation systems. We have talked about it. Westchester Joint Waterworks would like us to enact legislation for just that, because one thing that wasn't mentioned earlier for Westchester Joint Waterworks is that there actually is a strain on the system, meaning we can't get enough pressure in the system for water use in the early mornings. And that's because most people have their irrigation system set on a timer for 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning. So imagine everyone in Larchmont, Mamaroneck, Harrison, the village of Mamaroneck and town of Mamaroneck, all those, and especially Harrison with those big properties, all having their irrigation systems going at the same time as everyone's taking their morning shower, brushing their teeth, washing their face, making their breakfast. So what happens is there's a drain on the system, and there are certain spots where they can't get enough pressure in the system to supply the appropriate water pressure. They would like us to enact legislation that would require the homeowners to irrigate on alternate days, so that if you had a house that ended in an odd number, you would do it on a certain day and an even number on another day. And that would that is something that they're asking us to do. We actually have the ability to do that in the town. We actually passed a law that allows us to require that. I know that they'd like the villages to do the same thing. We have not used it yet, and usually people think of you need that during a drought, and certainly that would be the case during a drought, but it's even for the water pressure itself. Because if we don't maintain that water pressure, the Westchester Joint Waterworks is fined enormous amounts of money or required to do very large capital investments. And the Westchester Joint Waterworks is us. I mean, I'm the trustee along with the mayor of the village of Mamaroneck and the mayor of Harrison.
So are you saying that there is legislation?
In the town, sorry, in the town it exists, but we haven't required it. We have enabling legislation. I don't know if it exists in the villages.
Yeah, this came up and we were looking into it. We do not have a permitting process in the village of Larchmont for sprinkler systems. And with that, what Scarsdale has, it has a mandated rain monitor, and we haven't got that. There are those on our board that says the rain monitors don't work, and it's largely a waste of time. So we're reluctant to start any kind of procedure that really doesn't have any point to it. In other words, would automatically cut down on the consumption. But the idea of having a rain monitor is a terrific one, and I'd love to see how the technology has improved to allow us to have something like that, because it's a terrible thing in the rain to see all of this water going to waste.
Yeah. You know, let me try and appeal to your pocketbook, and that is that when we consume water, the city of New York bills what's called an excess surcharge for water use above 150 gallons per day per capita. And each year we have generally gone over that per capita amount. So it's not just a question of conservation for environmental reasons, it's also a fact that you are paying more as your water use goes up.
It's up to almost a triple. It's almost a triple. You have a basic rate, and then anything over that, the rate is tripled. And that's why the new water meters would be so important, because we may be able to bill then individual owners and create some type of basis for that.
Any other questions? Well, I'd just like to mention that there are municipalities that have passed legislation that water in restaurants is not automatically put on the table, but it's only served by request.
In like New York City for years.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I don't see why we're not doing that.
That's actually a good idea. The water legislation in the town that Nancy referred to allows us to impose that during a drought. But you're right, that's another piece of legislation that would be very helpful.
Talk to Joyce right away.
This is a little off track, but when, if ever, is the Jefferson Avenue Bridge going to be?
Right after the Tappan Zee.
The Jefferson Avenue Bridge was supposed to be completed, in June of 2013. So we fixed the sewer last fall and put it back in service. We were told by the contractor they would finish it in September, then October, then November, and of course that's not done. One of the things we've been waiting for, working with them on with the Joint Waterworks and the County Health Department, is restoring the water main that was taken out of service and has to be put back in under the road. That's being done right now. We had to get the approvals from the County Health Department, which we hope to get this week. Then the water main work will be done. I believe the curbs, it was reported to me that the curbs and sidewalks are done by the contractor. So at this point, the last two things we need to do are really the water main and the paving, so that should be done by mid to late July, and then it's back in service.
Thank you.
And then just another thing, just talking about water conservation and things like that, and long-term planning and things people should know about. New York City Department of Environmental Protection is working on a long-term plan to shut down one of the water main tunnels. So that was part of the reason why they put in the third water tunnel to convey enough water to our area, but it doesn't get as 100% of the water that we demand, like Steve said, like Ann said, like Nancy said, for our sprinkler systems, for our watering systems. We've had people come into the village of Mamaroneck complaining about a $1,000 water bill, and that could be caused by a broken and running toilet. So imagine if at the point that the New York City shuts down this water tunnel, they are going to put mandated restrictions on us, and this is looking at, I think it was 2017 or some maybe even 2020, several years down the road, but still it's approaching. We're going to have to shut down, reduce consumption by as much as 50%, if not possibly even more, 50%. So that's going to affect lawn watering and other things like that that are not necessities of life. So that's something that we all have to plan for. The first stage is to do, like Nancy said, the controlled watering or watering on a timer. There's another way to do it that would also benefit, and that's night watering. So it reduces the amount of water. It makes it less likely it's going to be evaporated up during the daylight hours, so it'll actually soak in and benefit the lawns more. So, all things we need to plan for and look towards to.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panel. It's been very informative. I want to also apologize because usually we go around and introduce ourselves, and for some reason, I guess I got so caught up in the topic in our last meeting that for the first time I neglected to do that. So I want to thank Richard Allen, who had to leave, unfortunately, for his attendance and his participation on the board. He's retiring and will be leaving our community. I'm sorry you can't hear me say this to him, but we all miss him and will miss him and miss his presence here. But I want to thank all of you for coming, and I apologize for not allowing everybody to identify themselves. I'm glad that Nancy White, who also had to leave, was able to announce the house tour. Is there any other announcement that a person would like to make about a local? Yes, go ahead.
No,
Identify
I
yourself
have the
too.
pamphlet.
Oh, good. Okay. Would you identify yourself too?
I'm Drayton Garrity. I'm a forever citizen of the town of Mamaroneck.
Great. Terrific. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you in the fall.